you.
So good afternoon. The paper I'm going to present is the insurance value of state tax and transfer programs by ONS and Lattmer. It's a paper about the transfer systems enhanced in the US with a particular point of view. I would like first to show the main intuition of the paper, which is why there is an insurance value in this transfer system, and then attach it to reality, first by explaining the taxes and state transfers they consider, and then showing the results. Finally, I'm going to make some consideration, both those who are proposed by the authors and then the one that were made by me. So, the main intuition of the whole paper is separating two different values in the system of tax and transfers. Noting that we are considering the state systems rather than the federal ones. This is really the main goal of the whole work of the authors, so I'm willing to spend some time on this. The first value they considered is the redistributive value, which is what you get when you are part of the program, and it's what you get over the average of the normal transfer people will get usually. So, for example, if you live in a state where everyone gets transfers, and net transfers, so the net of taxes of a certain sum, then you will receive more because, for example, you are a single mother with a child. That more is the redistributed value of the transfer. This is when you are facing a certain expected income. On the other hand, we have the insurance value of the system, which is what the part of the transfers that appear when your income, the income you realize, is lower than what you expect it to be, and the value you get in this case is part of an insurance, which is the same intuition you usually have for private insurance. So, taking the same example as before, if a single mother with child gets sick and can't work, her income will be lower, but her transfer value will be higher because the state can pay for her medical needs. Noting that the transfers in this case doesn't need to be always cash, but can be payment, for example, for something, or vouchers. Looking at these things from a different point of view, you can say that the predictable changes in income are ensured by the redistributive value. So everything that can be expected on the income is covered by the redistributive value of the system, while those things that are unpredictable are taken care of. They are taken care of by the insurance value. If you want to take the extreme of this, you can say that if everything was predictable, then there would be need for an insurance value, because of course you can take a redistributive value which covers everything. And on the other extreme, if everything was unpredictable, then it would be really hard to take any redistributive value, because you don't know whether your expected income will suffer or not. So now, having defined these two different values, the main thing to do is to see how they behave. In particular, how they behave with respect to the income of those who should receive it. According to logic, it should be expectable that when you get richer, usually the transfers should be lower, because of course those are intended to the side of the population who are more in need. But that's not the case for one of the two values. As a matter of fact, the main difference between the redistributive value and the insurance value is that while the redistributive value acts like it is supposed to do, decreasing with income, so it's higher for those who are poorer and lower for those who are richer, the insurance value does exactly the opposite, which is also the opposite of what it is supposed to do. So the more rich you are, the more you will get. This may be surprising, but if you look with an economical point of view, it's really understandable, because there are many researches showing that richer people have more coverage by insurance, basically because they have more to lose, so they have more to insure. Also, another important fact is on mobility, because remember, we are considering state systems, so we are not considering on a country level. And while the redistributed value, of course, gives incentives to those who are richer to leave the state because they get less benefits, the insurance value does exactly the opposite. So these two different values act in opposite directions, both with income and with mobility. Now, I would like to present the many programs and taxes they considered. The taxes they consider are the state sales taxes, the federal and state personal income taxes. These are very common taxes, mostly present in every country. While the transfers they considered are the assistance for families with a dependent child, which is a program which lasted until 1996, which was supposed to give help for single-parent households and that income requirements, and the temporary assistance for needy families, which substitute the AFDCE, which covers a much larger problems for families, but has more requirements, like work requirements, time limits, and so on. On the other hand, we have the Medicaid, or the State Children Health Insurance Program, announced in 1965, which is basically a public health insurance for eligible low-income people. And the eligibility is similar to those of the other two programs, but it's less strict for the income requirements. So even richer people who doesn't have access to the AFDC or the TNLF can have access to Medicaid. Having seen this, I would like to present the results they have. They've taken data from the pioneer study on income dynamics, and they consider data between the period from 1972 to 2004, dividing it into 3 different decades, starting from 1972 to 1982, from 82 to 92, and from 92 to 04. And they have taken into account individual data rather than family. Although many of this data was regarding family characteristics like net income, the taxes they paid, and the benefits they received. So this was the main result. We have a dashed line showing the naive annual value of benefits family would get. We have on the graph the percentiles of population regarding income and the net benefit they will get, which can be, of course, positive as well as negative. The naive annual value is what people would get if, using the framework the authors developed, if the expected income is actually the same as the income it will realize. And as you can see, the square blue line, which represents the redistributive value, is really similar to the naive annual value because, of course, it doesn't consider the insurance value, so it's based only on the expected income. There is only a slight difference with the poorer part of the state and the highest part. The blue line instead represents the total value, which is the benefits people get both from the redistributive value and the insurance value. And as you can see, there is a large difference. And while the redistributive value decreased a lot with income and reached 0 benefit around the 60th percentiles, the total value reached 0 across 75, which is why we have to skip to the next slide, which shows the insurance across value. And as you can see, it does exactly the opposite of the redistributive value, constantly increasing with income, with a really sharp increase at the end of the baseline. On this graph, you can clearly see why, considering that the total value is given by the sum of these two values, you can clearly see why they act in different directions and why the total value doesn't have such a decrease with the increase in income. They considered, of course, the prospects of mobility while considering these values, and more important, the risk aversion value. They consider a coefficient in this graph of 3, which is what usually is used in the literature. But they shown that if this coefficient increases, so if people in the state is more risk averse, then the insurance cross value will increase, so get higher, and so the same will happen to the total value. So that if the state population is really risk averse, then the redistributive effect will have a great strength going against it. They also consider different ages, but they seem that even if there are certain ages where it's easier to be part of programs, because of course they are mainly based on characteristics of the family, there isn't so much difference. And finally, they consider the mobility, because of course they consider the fact that the cost of mobility between different states in the United States has decreased over time, and they've seen that, of course, people who should be more inclined to move away from countries with high redistributive value receives a lot of insurance value. So they are not so inclined to leave because they receive a lot of benefit, although it may not seem so. So to conclude, first I would like to present how this paper is related to the literature. It takes a lot from two different works. The first by Buchanan in 1976, which showed why the poor people, who represents the majority in most countries, doesn't vote for more transfer systems, and this is why they had the intuition to divide the transfer value into two different values. But the difference with Buchanan is that it considered only federal system, so there was no mobility. And the Grant and others from 2010, which was a work showing that countries and states with higher redistributive value doesn't have the same effect on consumption levels. So basically, the fact that there is more transfers doesn't translate into more consumption. What this paper adds to the literature is basically the newness of its methodology and target, because they developed an entire framework to calculate these values, and they are, I won't say the first, but one of the first to consider state systems instead of federal systems, and the measure of taxes and the program analysis, because of course, if you want to just study the statistics, you can, using the framework, you can study which are the taxes and the programs they value over the time they consider. The consideration the authors made instead are that even if income has increased over time, and the same happened to the insurance value, because of course over time there has been an economic growth. The same didn't happen to the redistributive value, and finally, that people that support transfers program, if they can get anything, or at least it seems so, they like the fact that they want to insure themselves, which is the same that happens with the private insurance. Finally, I would like to make some personal comments. When I started studying this paper, which I chose randomly by the list, I didn't know really what to expect because I hadn't read any abstract or anything. So I developed two different feelings while studying it. The first one was that it's really an interesting work because it presents something which is, I wouldn't say revolutionary, but really surprising, because basically welfare system in the US works in a way that the poorest part of society gets a lot, and the richer part of society too gets a lot. And in the medium there is like a whole nothing. And so it made me think that what were they thinking? What was the target audience? Because on a certain way, politicians should be the one who should firstly care about these things, because they are the one who enhance the system and the one who make policies. But on the other hand, they usually use a difficult language, and usually this seems like they were referring